From the castle in Owings Mills, Maryland, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Wednesday in October, the very first day of October. Jonas, we are back with our brick background. If you're watching live on Facebook, YouTube, or X, you can see it. You can probably hear the sound of a metallic, some kind of roller thing going by. And of course, you'll hear a lot of the access granted sound from people coming into the Ravens facility, but such is life. We are going to discuss a lot today here on the Banner Ravens podcast. If you are listening anywhere on your favorite podcast platforms, give us a like, give us a 5-star review, and I will read it out here on the show. I promised the other day that we would do a Thursday episode to preview the Texans game in week 5, but so much has happened in the last few days in the wake of the Ravens' terrible loss over the weekend to the Chiefs that we have to do 2 episodes. So we're going to do 1 episode today and another episode Friday. Friday's episode will be more focused on the matchup against the Texans. Today, we're going to talk about the job security of John Harbaugh and some of the members of the Ravens coaching staff, as well as the devastating news that defensive lineman Nnamdi Madubuike is out for the season. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, before we get into our conversation about the Ravens coaching staff, we do have to talk about the fact that Nnamdi Madubuike is out for the season with a neck injury. Absolutely devastating news for one of the Ravens' young stars. John Harbaugh declined to answer questions about the long-term future of Nnamdi Madubuike, whether this could affect his career. It wasn't like he said anything positive about the prognosis of him coming back beyond this year. He said, quote, "A lot of that is something that he needs to, as in Nnamdi needs to address with you guys on his time. So I really can't speak for him. I wouldn't want to." Jonas, this is just devastating for him personally. You have to think of the player first, obviously, in these kind of situations. And he was truly a rising star in this Ravens organization. There's a reason they handed him a $98 million contract a year and a half ago. And it's absolutely brutal news that Nnamdi Madubuike will not be with this team the rest of the 2025 season.
Yeah, it's a tough break. They lose so much in the pass rush. They lose so much in their run defense. They lose so much of a guy who was just a beloved teammate, locker room presence, do everything player. Put up a story this morning just on the Ravens problems. And I think probably the most jarring stat from looking at the entire scope of this team is they've had over 100 snaps, just over 100 snaps pass rushing the quarterback this season without Madubuike on the field. They have 1 sack in those 102 snaps total. And like the Ravens sack rate as it is low enough to take out him. And also, obviously not having Kyle Van Noy for a big portion of that has definitely hurt. But you just wonder, does he matter more as a pass rusher? Does he matter more? These are the kind of questions that, unfortunately, a terrible defense has to reckon with. And there are no obvious answers because there aren't a lot of guys who are quite literally built like him on this roster. Like Roger Washington can kind of occasionally give you some pass rush juice, but he's not going to be the explosive force that Nnamdi is. Anis Peebles, maybe by the end of this year could give you a reasonable facsimile of him on pass rush downs, but you just clearly, with the Ravens, I think playing him 9 snaps Sunday against Kansas City, don't trust him to be able to be solid there up the middle when they've already been so compromised on these inside runs. So that just puts even more pressure on the edge rushers to do their job, which they have not been doing a good job at either. So, it's one thing to just reckon with the reality that he's not going to be out for the season, but the possibility, maybe the likelihood that this is going to be a career ender or a career disruptor is really, really sad. I think the kind of hesitation from John Harbaugh to talk about all this is a little bit reminiscent of what happened with Tyus Bowser after his knee situation that the team was reluctant to talk about, and Tyus didn't really want to talk about. And so I know that John Harbaugh has talked about, you mentioned, well, you guys should talk to Nnamdi. And it's like, well, is he going to be in the
right? We haven't
are the
seen
Ravens going to set anything up for us to get an understanding? Because it feels like the next time that he sets up a presser, it'll be like one that Zach Orr had to announce that he was retiring. So you just don't know what exactly is the next step in all this, but it's probably not a good one.
Yeah, if this is career ending, it's a terribly quick end for a guy who was really on his way to becoming an all-time Raven. I don't think it's a stretch to say that. I don't think he's there yet, obviously, but the kind of numbers that he put up in his first stint as a Raven, pretty incredible. 30 sacks, that already puts him 8th all-time in Ravens history. He doesn't turn 28 until November. There was so much good football ahead of him. A former third-round pick who turned into an almost $100 million player, a 2-time Pro Bowler. That 4-year, $98 million deal that he signed last spring, it's unfortunate that we have to talk about it this way, but football is a business, and there are conversations that I'm sure are being had in the building now. If Nnamdi Madubuike were to be forced to retire because of this neck injury, that deal that he signed had $53.5 million guaranteed at signing, $75.5 million guaranteed in all. And per Brian McFarland, who does a great job evaluating the Ravens cap situation, he tweeted the other day that if Madubuike were to retire, the Ravens would be absolved from having to pay any future salary, including his $22 million fully guaranteed for 2026. But there would still be close to $30 million in dead money from his signing bonus and option bonus prorations that haven't yet hit the cap. So basically, those two areas of his contract are prorated not when the deal was signed, but over future years. And so this is definitely something that is on the back of everybody's minds. On the forefront of everybody's minds is just thinking about how the heck you can possibly replace somebody who is as ascendant a talent as Nnamdi Madubuike. You just said, Jonas, there's not really a replacement on the roster. And if you're looking at short term, if you are still considering this season a season where you want to go for it, you're not going to find anybody on the street who does what Nnamdi Madubuike does. You're not going to find very few people in the NFL, period, who do what Nnamdi Madubuike does right now. The only guy I can really think of, a guy on a losing team that might be traded at some point before the trade deadline, is somebody we've talked about before, is Tennessee Titans Jeffrey Simmons. But still, not of the caliber that Nnamdi Madubuike is. There's just really not many easy answers for this team that is in desperate need of pass rush and run support.
Yeah, and I think Jeffrey Simmons is of the caliber of player that the Titans and their ownership, if they're smart, will have come to regret trading. They traded A.J. Brown when he was in his prime. All he's done is develop into a top 5, top 10 receiver. They traded Derrick Henry, or they didn't trade Derrick Henry. They let Derrick Henry walk, watched him become a guy who rushed for almost 2,000 yards in his first Raven season. Jeffrey Simmons, he's gotten in some trouble with his general behavior, but is an awesome game wrecker. You watched him play Sunday against the Texans. I know it was a blowout loss, but like he had a sack in about 2 seconds where no one blocks him. He swims to the center. He's right on CJ Stroud as soon as he can, take a step back. So it's a tough situation. Maybe there will be some more obvious sellers by the time that we get to that early November trade deadline. That makes sense. But with how big this playoff field is and just everything else that goes into the fact that the Ravens would have to pay a premium for someone like Madubuike, it's tough to know what their next step is. We know that John Harbaugh acknowledged that they could be in the market for a guy to help him out, but like you said, impact pass rushers, of which Jeffrey Simmons is one, are just not available for anything cheap. The Ravens got Yannick Ngakoue, 4 or 5 years ago, rather for a 4th round pick, but he was not at that point anywhere close to the caliber of a player that Jeffrey Simmons is. So, yeah. And it just, what do you do? There aren't a lot of obvious roads to go down.
They don't grow on trees, and the trade deadline isn't for another month. And like you said, Jonas, we're 4 games into the season. Teams aren't folding in the season this early unless you are a team like the Titans. There are very few teams that are totally out of it at this point. I mean, even the Giants got their first win of the season yesterday. So teams can still convince themselves that they can go for it. And so they're going to dangle their guys. So Very, very difficult news to lose Nnamdi Madubuike for the season. Let's keep it on the injury front because, boy, are there a lot of injuries on this Ravens team. We do have to hand out our Who's Got It Better Than award, and that goes to Emory Jones Jr., third-round rookie tackle, still listed as a tackle, although it has been suggested before, and John Harbaugh has said they will give him a look at guard. This is the very first time that we have seen him at a Ravens practice. Even before he got drafted, he was dealing with injuries, had shoulder surgery, and the Ravens placed him on the NFI list to start the season. His appearance in practice today means they open up his 21-day practice window, during which they have to decide either whether he's going to make his return or end up on season-ending NFI, or season-ending IR, I should say. So that is great news because we'll talk about at some point. We've talked about a lot the Ravens' needs along the offensive line and whether Emory Jones could factor into that. Also at practice today, Travis Jones, defensive tackle, that is a good sight. So was Kyle Van Noy, somebody who's missed the last couple of games. Still not at practice, though. Lamar Jackson, who suffered his injury against the Chiefs. Pat Ricard, who is yet to make his season debut with his calf injury. Ronnie Stanley, who started the Chiefs game but was immediately sidelined with his ankle injury. Devontae Walker, a surprise no-show at practice today. Roquan Smith with his hamstring injury. Nate Wiggins with his elbow injury. Marlon Humphrey with his calf. And Chidobe Awuzie, also not at practice. Boy, this team is hurting, Jonas. I know we have 4 days to go until the game, but gosh, that is just a lot of guys to be counting on to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, every game on the Ravens schedule feels like the most important game of their season. And to go into this, winnable game against the Texans with the most depleted roster, it feels like, since the end of that 2021 season when they didn't have Lamar. Guys were banged up. Guys were sick with COVID. It was just kind of an injury and illness apocalypse. We're not at quite those historic levels where the Ravens were just trotting out guys basically off the practice squad to start in these meaningful late season games. But, this is where you hope that the depth of this team is able to shine through. And certainly you hope that the coaching is able to level up some just to give these guys a chance. I mean, I think, if the Ravens, we've talked about how the defense can maybe mirror the Bills, 2024, where they weren't great on a down-to-down basis. But what they did was create turnovers and help their offense that way. That Bills team had some injuries. It didn't have anywhere quite near the number of injuries or the scope of injuries as last year's Lions team, which, if you remember, somehow made it to the NFC's #1 seed despite losing so many impactful guys. And that was coaching. That was Aaron Glenn doing his thing. That was obviously Kelvin Shepard, who got, his promotion to the defensive coordinator position, helping out there. And the Ravens need some similar, miracle workers to work their miracles. Like that, they need guys to perform like starters, even if they haven't started. They need guys to know not only what they have to do, but what the guy next to them has to do, which I think has been just a failure of too many of these busted plays that we've seen from the Ravens. So who knows what the shakeup in personnel is going to mean for this team against the Texans or against a much more impressive Rams offense the next week. But I think this is the kind of week where if you're John Harbaugh, you have to prove that everyone on this staff is rowing in the same direction. Everyone on this staff can get their individual units to function as a collective, to do whatever it is on the game plan that they need to get this team ready. Because the manpower that they're going to put out there on Sunday, combined with the fact that even when this defense was healthy, was not very good, would suggest that we are looking at a very bad Texans offense having a very good performance on Sunday. But prove it, prove us wrong. Show us that Teddy Buchanan and Trenton Simpson know to work together. Show us that Mike Green can be used more effectively as a pass rusher. Show us that Malachi Starks can be the kind of disruptor that we saw that he was in training camp, but has been nowhere close to being in the season. So it's on the players obviously to step up, but it's on the coaches to put these guys in positions to succeed, which they generally haven't been doing a great job of this season.
And John Harbaugh, during his Monday press conference, expressed his confidence in the coaching staff. He said, quote, "I have confidence in all our guys, including Zach Orr, our players, our coaches." And he said, "We're not too far away on defense. I really feel confident that we're going to play really good defense this year. I really am. I know the fans hear that, and I hope they have a little bit of confidence in us that we've been down this road before a little bit." Jonas, This is a defense that is currently last in the NFL in points allowed per game, 33.3. They're second in the NFL in yards allowed per game, second to last, however you want to look at that. They're giving up a ton of yards and they're giving up a ton of points. And there's a natural pressure, heat that is being felt by this coaching staff. On our last podcast that we did after the Chiefs game, I won't lie, comments were not too kind to us because they didn't think we went in hard enough on the coaches. I disagree. I think that you have said since week one that this coaching staff looks continually outcoached. It happened against the Bills. It happened at times during the Browns game, and it happened especially during the Chiefs game as well, and especially during the Lions game as well the week before that. We are definitely critical, I think, of the coaching staff where it should be, where criticism should be leveled. But Jonas, personally, I've been covering this team for 3 years. I've been living in Baltimore for about a decade. I've never seen as much of a groundswell call for John Harbaugh to be fired from the fan base as I have within the last 3 weeks. Have you seen anything quite like this? Has the chorus ever been this loud during your time covering the team?
No, I think there was a pretty big knee-jerk reaction to the Ravens losing in the 2023 AFC Championship game, knowing that Mike Macdonald was in all likelihood headed out the door for that Seattle job. And, there was this fascination with the shiny new thing and the frustration with this team that looked like one of the best in many, many years, not being able to break through, reflecting poorly on John Harbaugh because, it's been a while since they've gone to the Super Bowl, at least by the Ravens standards. So I think there was some frustration there. But you're right. I mean, the fact that this team, including by us, was such a popular Super Bowl pick and was so close to winning comfortably in that week one game, it's kind of reflected poorly on just where things have fallen, where not only do you have the defense in tatters, but the offense is inconsistent. The special teams have been better, but not as flawless as they were in the prime John Harbaugh years. You have Zach Orr being a handpicked guy, falling on his face repeatedly. You have Todd Monken having so much continuity there, but not being able to have any of the consistency on a down-to-down basis that I think we all expected from this team. And that falls at the feet of the CEO head coach in John Harbaugh. So you put all that together with some of the high leverage decisions that we have criticized, not going for it or doing things the wrong way or the unconventional way and having it blow up spectacularly. I think even the kind of, bandwagon fair weather fan could understand that this season has gone pretty spectacularly bad. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the most disappointing team in this first month of the season. It's the most disappointing team in the NFL. The Texans had high hopes, but there was an understanding that offense would be severely compromised if they didn't fix their offensive line. The Chiefs have rebounded 2-2, and there was an understanding that without Rashee Rice and without Xavier Worthy, there would be some tough sledding for this offense. But until Sunday, the Ravens had relatively good injury luck. Would have helped to have Pat Ricard, would have helped to have Isaiah Likely, but there was still more than enough talent there. And the defense just has not lived up to any kind of expectations. They got blown off the ball in that week one game against Buffalo, despite coming into the season with the reputation. Harbaugh is in a situation where if they don't, who knows what will happen at the bye week.
Yeah, the case, I think, for firing John Harbaugh, for moving on from John Harbaugh, rests in the fact that this team can't get over the hump. They can't beat Buffalo and Kansas City when it matters. Their last Super Bowl win came 12 and a half years ago. Since then, only one AFC championship game appearance. You have perhaps the best quarterback in the NFL, a multiple-time Super Bowl champion or Super Bowl MVP. You need to maximize his window, and you need to raise your ceiling even if it comes at the risk of lowering your floor. What John Harbaugh has given this organization is a high floor, period. I mean, he consistently has them winning a lot of games with Lamar Jackson at the helm, who is consistently one of the best winners when he is out there on the field. However, I think when you look at this team right now, as they sit 1-3 entering week 5 with a bye coming up on the horizon. I think it is highly, highly, highly unlikely that John Harbaugh gets fired during this season. And I'll explain why. The only person that you have to convince that John Harbaugh needs to go is Steve Bisciotti, the owner, who hired John Harbaugh 17 years ago. Steve Bisciotti loves stability. Only 2 GMs under his tenure, Ozzie Newsome, Eric DaCosta. He's personally close to John Harbaugh. They've been together for 17 years. He's not going to fire the man in the middle of a season because that would be harsh. It would be probably undeserved considering the reputation that John Harbaugh has built and all the things that he's done for this franchise. It would feel a little bit cruel to give him the boot in the middle of the season. But more practically, and Kyle Goon put this great in a column on thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, that when you fire a head coach in the middle of a season, you almost never make the playoffs that season. You are almost always giving up or punting on that season. And I don't think there's any reason after 4 games to punt on this season. If you think that you can fire John Harbaugh after 4 games and still make a run and make the playoffs, who's going to be your head coach? Who's going to be your interim head coach? It's not going to be Zach Orr, considering all the issues that he's had on defense. Todd Monken has been a great coordinator for the last couple of years. As you just said, Jonas, there are some issues there that he needs to focus on. Adding interim head coach to his title wouldn't exactly relieve his burden there. Are you talking about special teams coach Chris Horton? There's not a ready-made replacement right now other than secondary coach Chuck Pagano, who has head coaching experience, that would make sense to fill that spot. And I think the only way that John Harbaugh would even be considered to be fired after this season, I think it's pretty much off the table he's fired during the season, but even after the season for him to be on the hot seat is if Lamar Jackson comes back either soon or right after the bye, is healthy, and the Ravens are still not a good team. But that is unlikely because when Lamar plays, the Ravens win. He has a .724 winning percentage. That's better for a career than Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, Brett Favre. He wins regular season games. So to me, it's very unlikely. It's hard for me to imagine. I could be totally wrong. It's hard for me to imagine a situation where Lamar Jackson only misses a few games and the Ravens are still bad. Because when Lamar is healthy, the Ravens win. Now, if Lamar is out for any long stretch of times, if he's out for 7 or 8 weeks and this team does not make the playoffs, well, then John Harbaugh has the ready-made excuse that they didn't have their superstar quarterback in there. So for me, it's hard to envision a scenario. One, I think it's off the table that John Harbaugh is fired during the season, barring a complete disaster, unforeseen disaster that we can't possibly imagine in the clubhouse or in the locker room, on the field, whatever it is, off the field. Barring that, I think it's off the table that John Harbaugh is fired during the season. And even after the season, I think it would take a lot for him to be on the hot seat.
I think the thing that fans maybe lose sight of a little bit is like you send a message by getting rid of a coach, whether it's a head coach, coordinator, send a message by trading a guy, cutting a guy, whatever. But with a decision that big, you are also sending a message to your candidate pool. And in this case, the message would be, here's a coach who we've won a Super Bowl with. Here's a coach who's won 2 straight AFC North titles. We're going to fire him in the middle of the season. Do you want to join our franchise? And sure, there are plenty of reasons to come to Baltimore and have an expectation that you could be an instant winner because of the infrastructure here, because of Eric DaCosta, even though obviously fans have their own issues with him, because of Lamar Jackson, because of Kyle Hamilton, because of the talent that you've accrued and the smart people who are in this building. But coaches want to get paid. They want to go to places where they know that as many years on that contract within reason are guaranteed. And if you step into an environment where you feel like they were this quick to move on from this coach who is delivering like 80th percentile, 90th percentile results, what does that mean for me if I'm 1 step behind him, 2 steps behind him? It's very, very tough, I think, to kind of put yourself in those shoes. But I think it's a reality that like you're setting a tone for your coaching search by when you get rid of a guy or how you get rid of a guy. And that kind of connects to the whole Mike Macdonald issue. Like, first of all, John Harbaugh wasn't going to step aside after the 2023 season. just so Mike Macdonald, a guy who he's helped mentor, excuse me, would be able to step into and fulfill his shoes. Like the Harbaughs are coaches. They're going to be coaching for a long, long time. But what kind of pressure would that have put on Mike Macdonald to be the one who was handpicked to push his mentor out the door with the expectation that you're going to deliver us one step further, that this guy who has been one of the best coaches in the NFL for a very long time wouldn't. And that is just something that I think fans have to kind of divorce themselves from their myopia a little bit, just see the bigger picture, see that it's not just about, however many tens of millions of dollars you're willing to offer these coaches. It's what kind of leash will they be given? What kind of reasonable, grace period will they be granted if things like this happen? And I understand fans don't want to hear that, but I think that's just the reality of the situation.
I think there are a couple ways you could send a bad message to potential coaching candidates. I think one is you don't give a guy nearly enough time. If you fire a guy after one season goes very poorly, or you fire a guy halfway through his first season, like the Colts did with Frank Reich, I believe, right. Or not Colts, the Panthers did with Frank Reich back in the day. Yeah. That sends a bad message that you're not going to get a short leash. I think fans would say, though, that John Harbaugh has had a long enough leash, that John Harbaugh has been here 17 years and he still is given opportunity year after year. But you also have to look at the recent winning. I mean, the fact that the Ravens haven't gotten to a Super Bowl in 12 and a half years ignores the fact that they have gotten into the playoffs almost every year that John Harbaugh has been their head coach.
And they've consistently filled out M&T Bank Stadium, and this is ultimately a business for Steve Bisciotti.
That's the thing is, and fans who might be yelling at their phone right now at us, or yelling at the screen right now, you don't have to convince us, because you could convince me one way or the other given the results, and we may change our opinions. The only person you have to convince is Steve Bisciotti. So, like, for us to talk about it this way, we're not banging the table saying give John Harbaugh another extension. But what we are saying is we're not going to go too far down that road when we know it's not likely and we know it's not a reality. So that's why we're not going down that road, because we're living on this planet and we're in this building. So we know kind of what the sense of what the reality is, what's possible. And that's where we stand. How do you feel?
Yeah, there's obviously going to be a lot of factors to weigh, not just the on-field products and how everything looks optically, but also just the stuff that we have only partial accessibility to, which is the vibes in the locker room, whether coaches have been tuned out, whether guys don't feel like they're being treated fairly, or whether they're whether the strength and conditioning setup is not what it should be. Obviously, the past 2 years, they've been a very, very healthy team. This year, suddenly, all of a sudden, you've got these soft tissue injuries that are just doing a real number on the Ravens' health. So there's so many factors to consider. Obviously, the big one that Steve Bisciotti is going to have to consider if the season continues to spiral out of control is just how much does his relationship with John Harbaugh ultimately factor into the decision of whether to keep him or leave him. Obviously, you think that Eric DeCosta is probably on safer ground than John Harbaugh, because he has put together a reasonably good roster, but one that I think a lot of coaches probably would have broken through at some point with in the Super Bowl, but hasn't happened. And it's been, if John Harbaugh, we're putting the cart far before the horse here, but if John Harbaugh is on the outs here, then it would be the breakup of a very, very long and mostly fruitful relationship of working with Ozzie and then Eric DeCosta.
Right. For Bisciotti, the Ravens, like you said, are a business, and Harbaugh has been a good steward of the organization in so many ways. He views him as
very few off-field incidents.
Yeah, a tent
not a lot of scandal.
Right. He is a tent pole of this organization, like Eric DeCosta is. So it would take a lot. It would just take a lot for the Ravens to move on from him. In terms of the coaching staff that John Harbaugh has assembled, however, there is certainly a lot of pressure on Harbaugh himself from the outside to make changes to that coaching staff, despite the fact that he just expressed confidence in all those members of the coaching staff. I think the next natural move would be to fire an assistant if this continues to go awry. And you got to look at the defense. This is 2 straight years where the defense has underperformed. And Zach Orr was given this job with the roster that had just been the best defense in the NFL in 2023. There were some changes obviously made to that, but they underperformed massively for the first 10 games last year, got things together a little bit at the end, came into this season with just as high expectations, more pieces added to that defense, and they are the worst defense in the NFL through 4 games. Last time John Harbaugh fired an assistant during the season was 2016 when he fired Mark Trestman and replaced him with Marty Mornhinweg. He also did it in 2012 when he fired Cam Cameron. Of course, the Ravens won the Super Bowl that year, so there is precedent for it. Jonas, do you think that Zach Orr could be on the outs if this continues to spiral?
I mean, I think he would have to be the first sacrificial lamb. It just you can't have a chance of winning any of these games if the defense continues to be this massive of a disappointment. Obviously, it's going to have some caveats probably in these next couple games, next couple weeks. If this defense fails again, maybe at the same level or a slightly lesser level with the injuries that they are dealing with right now. Not having Roquan Smith is a big deal, even though he's not having a great season. Not having Marlon Humphrey, big deal. Nate Wiggins, probably their best, or definitely their best cover corner so far. We don't know how long that elbow injury is going to sideline him. As you said, we didn't see him at practice today. So it's just a situation where the Ravens have to figure out, one, do they have someone better than Zach Orr, someone who is distinct from Zach Orr to potentially lift this defense? Obviously, the natural replacement would be Chuck Mancano, but the secondary has not been a bright spot for this group. I don't know how much of a difference he would bring to the table in terms of schematics or leadership or whatever. It's clear that he's still very invested in these guys personally. You know, obviously, we talked during training camp about how he would be texting some of these cornerbacks and safeties that he works with at 3 or 4 in the morning, giving them tips on their technique or on film study, whatever. It's clear that he still loves this job. I don't know how much he loves it right now with this defense being what it is. But yeah, I mean, I think Zach Orr would probably have to be the first domino to fall if things go in their current trajectory, just because you can't have a team with this much talent on defense and not want to make some kind of change, especially if there's just mounting public pressure and even mounting, analyst pressure, just the experts, the Rex Ryans of the world wondering out loud why John Harbaugh continues to keep up with this defensive coordinator who could be argued has been, a big part of their early season struggle so far.
Yeah. All right. We are going to do a brief look ahead to the Texans game on the other side of another quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, word of the day is imperative because it is absolutely imperative that the Ravens win on Sunday against the Houston Texans. I'm not going to use the term must win because I think it is so overused. Imperative, by the way, means not to be avoided or evaded necessary. This is a Texans team that just got their first win, but it is a Texans team that is, with the Ravens, among the underperformers in the NFL so far this year. This is a win that, regardless of the personnel that the Ravens have on the field, even with Cooper Rush in at quarterback, it is so critical that the Ravens get this win because then they have the Rams, then they have the bye, and you cannot be with one win going into a bye week.
No, it would be one heck of a long shot. I guess it really depends. Again, this whole conversation is just the elephant in the room is as much as what the Ravens do matters, what the Steelers do matters almost just as much, because if they are indeed their only competition in the AFC North for a playoff spot, then you're just, as a Ravens fan, hoping and praying that it's so weird that Lamar is going to miss significant playing time before Aaron Rodgers does, considering everything we know about those two guys. and what they've been through the past 2 years. And so it could just be,
well, maybe we'll see.
yeah, maybe. So we'll it's basically, like you said, as close to a must-win game in early October as it can be, and not just for the state of their record, but you look at some of these ticket prices on the secondary markets, and they are already crashing and crashing fast. And you want to give these fans at least a little bit of hope. You don't want them selling off their 200 level tickets for what we all thought would be a tremendous Week 6 game against the Rams, because you just have no faith that you're going to have anywhere close to an enjoyable experience at M&T Bank Stadium on what should be a nice, October afternoon. You want to give these guys some hope, and to lose to this Texans team, even with all your injuries, would, I think, be the continuation of a just very, very bad spiral.
Yeah. All right. Jonas, you have to give me a grade on the podcast performances
again.
Yeah. I like to keep our bits going.
Oh my God. I'm going to say you were
scale of 1 to 10.
Probable.
Okay. I like when you don't give me a number, when you specifically just give me an adjective.
Yeah.
Or even a noun in that instance.
Blue.
Just colors. Yeah, I suppose so. What do you think of One Battle After Another?
I liked it a lot.
It was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, like 4.2 on the old 5-point scale.
That's the Ravens injury situations. Just one battle after another. I tried to, for our last podcast, find another Paul Thomas Anderson title that would fit in there. There Will Be Blood felt a little too gory and violent, especially because all the injuries were soft tissue injuries.
Could Cooper Rush be the master on Sunday?
I've never seen that, so I can't really.
Either.
Yeah, Phantom Thread, something in there. Certainly won't be Boogie Nights. All right, at Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano, and at Old Banner Sports. Like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will have another show for you on Friday where we'll really dive into that Texans matchup, and we'll have more clarity on the Ravens injury front. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano.